got an idea. I don't know what to do with this idea, like most ideas that I get, because they end up being a little bit grand and impossible for me to implement personally. But I got an idea, and I'm hoping that it makes sense, and that even with my channel's limited reach and shadow banning, and the fact that, you know, YouTube tells me that I get like a 10 view engagement per video, which they're probably lying. I'm hoping that this idea can catch on. So I'm watching Canada yesterday, Trudeau, and I hate Trudeau, and we can talk about whose child he really is and everything else, but it doesn't even fucking matter. He did something interesting though, for the first time in a long time. He did something that was interesting, that lacks a little bit of explanation, or maybe deserves a little exploration. So he declared that the government of India was responsible for a person being murdered in Canada. So we're talking about Indians, okay? Canada has gone from a country with just a few Indians to a shit ton of Indian population in a short time, thanks to Trudeau. And an Indian got killed, is a Sikh. So, of all the sects, divisions of Islam, the Sikhs are, from what I understand, and I don't know shit about the Muslims, only a little bit from knowing some of them, so now I'm not professing to be all-knowing, but from what I understand, man, the Sikhs aren't usually the ones that get militant or violent, okay? Because the government of India then said, we stand by that because that guy was a terrorist. So, how interesting is that? Trudeau invites a bunch of essentially unvetted foreigners into the country. One of them is a terrorist, or is not a terrorist, but is on India's, this guy's a terrorist list, to the point where the Indians actually infiltrate Canada, or maybe just use agents they had there already, more likely, and then they kill this guy, and then they have no problem taking credit for it. This is interesting all the way around, but what interests me more so is the concept that Trudeau put out here. Go after the home country. Well, I've got a lot of opinions about different facets of our current problem in this American experiment that we have, because I can no longer call it a country, because there's just no unification here, and it's terrible, and it has to do with communist infiltration and control of media and Hollywood and government, and even now education, all the way down to the grade school level, real estate, food. They're fattening us up, the proverbial fattened calf, or lamb to the slaughter, pick your metaphor, idiom, whatever. That's what they're doing with all of us, and distracting us and having us fight each other is a big part of that plan. But, and specifically so though with the immigration, it's out of control. The legal immigration is even a little bit high, but the illegal border crossings are out of control. People who don't live in these border towns, or work for Border Patrol or ICE or something like that, or other positions in the government where they have to like literally see this every day, I don't think realize how bad it is. And to exemplify how bad it is, let's look at Italy. Okay, Italy has a small island, I believe it's called Lampedusa. They have 3,000 people that live there. That's been the steady population there for quite a while. Okay, 6,000 people arrived there, and they were Africans, migrants. Now, I don't know, I've been checking on this, I haven't gotten a vetted answer to this. My preliminary answer is that it was one, but I don't know if they came on one vessel or multiple vessels that landed there at the same time. Either way, those 6,000 people came to that island at one time. So let's just say that, because it's more logical as multiple vessels, let's just say they all arrived there within 24 hours, because they all got there at the same time. Well, 6,000 refugee migrants is fucking terrible, but it doesn't matter if it was 6,000 tourists who were there looking to have a good time and they wanted to spend money and they had absolutely no ill will toward the people of the island. That's not the case. I'm just saying, even if that was the case, you got 3,000 people that live there and you get double that in tourists. That's a national emergency. You know, like the American equivalent of, we better call FEMA, this is unsustainable. Now, the Italian military under Moroni has done fuck all. Zero. I don't understand this at all. I don't think anybody in the world understands it. I don't think the people of Italy understand this. The Italians, anyway. I don't think the Italians understand this. And best case scenario, you get double the population and those people are all benevolent, but you don't have the sewage, you don't have the resources, the housing, the food, you don't have enough supplies, resources. It's just not a feasible thing. And then when you add in the fact that these people are migrants, culturally different, and they have already done violent and destructive things. There have already been many acts of violence, sexual violence, physical violence, robberies. They have already attacked police, destroyed police cars, taken police cars, blocked off roads. I mean, they are, without a doubt, an invasion force. Okay? We have that problem here fucking almost daily. Monthly, without a doubt, but almost daily. Some days we get that many people coming over the border. And unless you're in one of the towns where a large portion of them land, you're not seeing it. So if we get, say, 6,000, okay, it just doesn't matter, let's say 10,000. Let's get 10,000 people that come over the border inside of a 48-hour period around the same place. And it doesn't matter if they come over the border in multiple places, 10,000 people at once, okay? But let's just say they all cross somewhere in Texas. Now, Border Patrol ends up splitting them up because their orders aren't to really do anything. There's no detaining, there's no checking their names, there's no talking about immigration status and legality. There's really nothing. In fact, a lot of those people stop because they want the government stipend, which that's a whole nother conversation. I'm not even going to get into that. But they don't really do anything but whack them up. Don't go all, essentially saying don't go to the same, go wherever you want, but don't all go to the same spot. So what happens is you take 10,000 people and you put 100 here, 100 there, 100 here, 100 there. This is a big country, okay? And as they are being provided transportation and in some case other forms of assistance to get to these other places, they're being dispersed rather quickly and people are not noticing. Now, if you live in an area, you live in whatever city you're in and you're like, man, there's just like all of a sudden there's this big cluster of people from somewhere else in the world. I can't tell. They're obviously not American or Americanized. They don't speak English, for example, but also you can tell their clothing is different, their movements, etc., etc. These are obviously a group and they just showed up like that. Where'd they come from? Well, they were probably redirected from one of the border towns. So unless you've seen that, you might not even be aware of this. And if you have seen that, and if it is a chunk of people, say like 100 people in one small area, you might say, well, sure, this looks like people who just got here and came, whatever, but who cares? It's like 100 people. Like there's, 85,000 people in this town that I live in, and who cares if 100 more people come? Well, when that happens all over the country, I mean, let me back up a little history lesson. And again, I don't want to get too deep into this because I can go on about this for a considerable period of time. But you know that Russia, up until the slaying of Tsar Nicholas II, was a Christian country. A monarchy of sorts. And they had little groups of people that went here and that went there in this large country, geographically large country. Even though a good portion of the population in Russia, just like in Canada, is condensed to certain areas. The majority of Canada's population is on the coast and it's near the U.S.-Canada border. the majority of their people live in places like British Columbia or Toronto, right? Same thing with Russia. Majority of the people are in the east and they're in certain cities. But still, when you disperse people like that, and they can go anywhere, like they did back then, as communist infiltrators, a couple here, a couple there, a couple here, a couple there. Nobody really notices, or they notice, but they don't think anything of it. Next thing you know, it takes one catalyst event, and then bam, all of a sudden they're unified and they're taking over control of the government, and that country hasn't been the same in over 100 years because of that. So if you have any doubts in your mind that that country is not still communist, then you don't really understand how shit works. But that was then, and this is now, an invasion force. Whether or not they were sent here by someone with a specific military objective, or whether they just come over the border because they can get away with it and go together in clusters to different areas, they're an invasion force. So what would happen if we were to take the position that Canada just took with this killing of this Sikh by the government of India? Which, again, I don't really understand. Whatever the reasons are, doesn't matter. What matters is the way Trudeau reacted to it, saying the government has to be responsible. What if we start doing that? What if every time a crime is committed by a migrant, every time a crime such as robbery, armed robbery, murder, sex crime, anything with violence, what about any time something like that happens, we then go after the parent country? Think about that. How long would it, because a lot of the Muslims that are in Europe, for example, they're different than the Muslims here. This is from my personal experience. I see the Muslims here as different. And when I have asked them, what do you think of this shit in Europe? Most of them don't claim those people as like their fucking kin, their brothers. They say, oh, those are shitty people. Those are people that are escaping from different countries where likely they have Sharia law, and they've committed crimes. Different crimes that under Sharia law would get them in a lot of trouble. Might get their fucking hands cut off, might get them put in prison for a long time, might get other serious punishments so they leave. And their governments don't want them there. So they kind of they don't really say anything, they let them go, and they figure, well, all these European governments, they're not just going to let them in. All these people, like they'll go somewhere, but who knows where. If they come back here, they're going to face punishment. That is kind of what I think. And I can't fucking prove it down to an absolute certainty, but that is what I think has happened there, and that's why I think the Muslim problem in Europe is so egregious, and so many of them are so violent and dangerous. That's why that happens. And that's kind of what I got reiterated by people here, the Muslims here. So just by logical deduction, and again, I can't vet this down to 100% certainty, I'm going to say that the South Americans that we get here are oftentimes it's the same kind of situation. Now, the media, which we've already established is infiltrated by essentially communist thought. The media calls these people refugees from war-torn countries or political escapees. Essentially they'd be political prisoners, or they'd be hunted down by their government for their whatever their belief. But the truth is that's bullshit. We have to assume that these people that come here, whether they're South American, or as we're seeing now, we're starting to finally get some of the Africans making their way over here. The northern Africans. These people are likely leaving because they are criminals, and they are coming in mass, and we're not doing anything about it. And because we're not Lampedusa, a small island where it couldn't be more plain to see, 3,000 people only even live there, and 6,000 people arrive, and they do violent stuff right away, right off the boat. No response. That's full mask off for this controlled government, okay? okay? So people mistakenly think here, well, it's going to be different because it's here, and these people, even though we might not kick them out when they're illegal because, we're bleeding hard about everything and, people and blah, blah, blah. Even though once they break a law here, though, then they'll be punished. Then they'll be arrested. They'll be put in jail. They'll be deported. No, man. The government's going to do the same thing that Moroni's doing over there. Fuck all. We just, for some reason, not me, I get it, but for some reason, the general American public, left and right wing, doesn't get this yet, that the government has no intention of doing anything, and that this invasion force, and you have to stop calling them refugees or immigrants, they're an invasion force. This invasion force that is here, they're going to do the same thing. Now, they may not all have one group that sent them here, like the communists did in Russia when they went after the Tsars. And by the way, if you didn't know, just in case you think I'm like making that up, they've been working on that for like 30 years. They did kill a different Tsar first, years before that. It wasn't until Nicholas that they had enough people there and enough financing. I won't get into that again now, but it wasn't until then that they actually got to take over the government. But this is the same thing here. Maybe they're not all sent by one government, by one people. It doesn't matter. They have a common interest, and they don't like our country. They don't love our country. They don't have any desire to be part of the American system. They're here because they can get stuff. That's it. We don't need any more people who want to just get stuff and not contribute anything. We don't need any of that. We got enough of a problem with that, with people who are already citizens and residents here, some of them generations and generations. We already got to work on that as it is. That's already a problem. We certainly don't need to take people from around the world anywhere that have that same attitude. That I'm going to go there because I can get shit, or I'm going to go there because I can get away with shit. They're nothing but what you call a net drain. And they're a negative net drain. They're dangerous. And this country is not going to survive unless people realize it's an invasion force. So my idea is, and I can't do this myself, somebody either file this through the international court, start going after. I got plenty of, now this I do have, I got plenty of case examples. I've got media reports, and in some cases the actual crime thing from the jail where it shows the charging. I got example after example of that, of foreign nationals committing crimes, violent crimes, sex crimes, robberies, murders, and whether or not they get punished here, most of the time they're not punished, or they're not punished severely. That's not the point. The point is, let's start going after their host country, their home country, where they're from. Let's go after them legally, financially, make them responsible for it, and get the compensation, right? Because once that happens, maybe they'll stop letting these people leave like this. And if you are not of a legal mind to be able to file this yourself, then perhaps figure out a way to put the political pressure on to suggest this to Biden. Now, I know he won't do it, but it doesn't matter. Congressmen, senators, they can try. You can try. I don't trust any of these people to do anything intelligent or to do anything correct. But you can try. And we can make this a consensus thought that people start thinking, yeah, let's do that. Let's start going after the home. I mean, this is the age of liability and responsibility. Everybody likes to blame upward anyway, right? Which a lot of times that shit's ridiculous. You get a hot coffee at McDonald's, for example, and burn yourself. It's McDonald's fault, right? Like this kind of shit's ridiculous. Litigiousness is ridiculous. But as that is the world that these communists have created with the court system, let's use that at the moment. Let's use that to protect and fix this country, because we are fucked. We are fucked if we don't. What do you think of that?